As I've said consistently, I'm not going to get into where we have or have not used confidential human sources. I can tell you that if you are asking if the violence at the Capitol on January 6th was part of some operation orchestrated by FBI sources or agents, the answer is no.
I'm really interested because I appreciate your invitation. You said you're prepared to disclose things as questions are asked. So I don't want to waste time, I just want to get to the questions, and as many members as can ask questions that you'll answer. I actually think I'd be glad for you to go on soliloquy, frankly, and tell us what you know. I think the American people want to know.
The investigation ties to the shooter reveals that on July 6th, he did a Google search for, quote, how far away was Oswald from Kennedy?
Wow. FBI Director Wray testified in front of Congress. We're getting into assassination talk and, surprisingly, some good J6 talk. Some interesting questions came across from Representatives Thomas Massie and Victoria Spartz, asking Christopher Wray specifically about whether or not they use confidential human sources and whether a lot of the propaganda that's been regurgitated by Joe Biden and the Democrats is accurate or true. We know it's not, but it's nice to hear from Christopher Wray that he knows it's not. And so we're going to start today by jumping in with Thomas Massie, and here is how this exchange went when Massie got Christopher Wray to admit that those gallows where they were going to hang Mike Pence were stupid props, and they didn't even find out who made those. Probably friends of Wray Epps. Here is the exchange between Massie and Wray.
And now I want to talk about another possible assassination attempt, and I'll start by showing a video of President Biden, and this is from recently. This is in the last month, if we can play that.
Gallows erected to hang the Vice President, Mike Pence.
Idiot.
I think it's fair to say it's one of the darkest days in the history of America.
Okay, and he's referring to January 6th. Were there gallows erected to hang Mike Pence, as the president says here?
I'm not aware of any physical gallows. I can't remember whether from a demonstration perspective there may not have been some kind of replica or symbol of something like that.
Yeah.
That's my impression. Can you raise that up so you can see it? It looks like there was some kind of prop that was built. The construction doesn't look like it lends itself to actually hanging somebody. It's more of a prop, I think, as you suggested, that was erected on January 6th. But if the president were correct that these gallows were erected to hang Mike Pence, that would be a very serious allegation, wouldn't it?
I would take it very seriously, yes.
Has anybody been arrested, or do you have any leads in conjunction with the erection of this gallows? We had a picture here on the screen, if you can show it again. It was just up there. There's an individual here who's seen near this gallows. Has he been arrested? Have you identified this person?
I don't know that I could speak to this specific person or the gallows that are pictured on the image. You know, we have had, I think, 850 people who have pled guilty to federal crimes related to January 6th, and I think, another 180, I think it is, convicted at trials. So I can't sure.
And some of them merely for going into the Capitol, but here the president suggests that individual intended to hang Vice President Pence, which seems like kind of a wild claim myself, given the construction of those gallows. But if we are to take him seriously, or even if we aren't, if you have no leads or you're not sure if anybody who erected those gallows was arrested or is being investigated, were there any confidential human sources involved from the FBI or any other agency in the erection of that prop, those gallows?
I'm not aware of anything like that.
Thank you. I yield back.
All right. Not aware of anything like that. Very curious there, Christopher Wray. So we will see more from him, obviously. Victoria Spartz was also diving in on this, and she laced into him saying more about these confidential human sources. We've covered a lot of this here. We know how many CHSs there were, at least in the Proud Boys case. 50 at least, according to the defense. Maybe not from the FBI, but from Homeland and other agencies. They were all there. Victoria Spartz is going to dig into Christopher Wray on this topic, and we're going to hear what she says right after this quick message from our friends. Take a look at this story I found about Attorney General Merrick Garland's whining, calling legitimate criticism against his office attacks on the DOJ. And with all the misinformation out there today, you may have missed this one. I'm looking at this on Ground News, an awesome website and app that combines related news from all over the world and political spectrum into one place. You can check them out by going to ground.news/RGE or just click the link in the description below. Ground News has been an excellent tool for my everyday research when I'm prepping the show, and I think it will be for you too. Let me show you how it works. Here you can see over 10 sources are covering this story, and that more coverage is coming from the left and the center than on the right, which makes sense. We can also see the difference in the headlines, with outlets like CNN repeating Garland's claims names, while the right calls them out. But not all stories are equal. Using their blind spot feed helps you identify what the media is and isn't covering on either side of the political spectrum and helps you catch stories that you may be missing. Ground News is amazing because it helps you see what friends and family with opposing views are seeing, and with the upcoming 2024 elections, this will be very important. It's super easy to get set up. Just go to ground.news/RGE or click the link in the video description below. If you sign up through my link, you'll get 40% off the Vantage plan, which is what I use to get unlimited access to all their features. I think Ground News is doing important work, and I hope you'll check them out. Visit ground.news/RGE. And now, Victoria Spartz versus Christopher Wray on confidential human sources who were there on January 6th and who are regularly used by the FBI to instigate and exacerbate this criminal activity. Setting up a Whitmer hoax, kidnapping fake plot in Michigan, doing the same thing on J6, having a bunch of CHSs all over infesting the venue, and now creating criminal prosecutions against Trump on classified documents cases, having the FBI used to ransack his residence there. The list goes on and on. Now we have questions about this assassination attempt, but how far does it go? Here is Spartz talking to Christopher Wray.
Did you have confidential human sources? I think you never answered that question on January 6th in the Capitol. Did you have some?
I'm sorry, what's...
Confidential human sources. Did you have them on January 6th in the Capitol?
Again, I'm never going to be getting into when and where we
Okay,
have
are
or
you
have
really-
not used confidential human sources. But
Okay, but he just told Massie that he did not know of any CHSs who erected that podium, the little gallows ordeal. So he will talk about some characteristics of CHSs.
You will understand the record that you had no confidential human sources that went into Capitol on January 6th.
as I've said consistently, I'm not going to get into where we have or have not used confidential human sources. I can tell you that if you are asking if the violence at the Capitol on January 6th was part of some operation orchestrated by FBI sources or agents, the answer is no.
No, I
And it's
didn't
a
ask you
disservice.
that.
Pounding the table, okay? Pounding the table because he's mad.
I
You are
asked you, so did you investigate if you any confidential human sources? Did you do any investigation and looking at that? So you're not answering if you had any or not. So if you had potentially, did you do anything you needed to make sure to investigate that none of your sources did anything wrong? If they did wrong, they were prosecuted the same way, like you're trying to prosecute a lot of people that really, even Supreme Court ruled recently that some unconstitutional charges.
Let me just add that there have now been, I think, 180 individuals who've gone to trial, in addition to the 850
but-
who've pled guilty.
So
Right,
what?
but I thought
In
that
your
if
red
it's
DC
charges,
courts, who
a lot of
cares?
People would
Yeah,
feel guilty.
finish.
But let me say just quickly, because I only have 10 seconds, really. So I hope you will take seriously what you're doing. You know, related to the border security is also a crisis. You know, your vice president was leading on that. Has she initiated meetings with you to lead, like weekly or monthly meeting where she actually get briefings from you as a leading border czar that had that function? Have you had that? Has she initiated any meetings on a regular basis with you?
On this issue of confidential human sources, number one, I will say there is a DOJ OIG in review that's underway that I think
Good.
addresses some of these kinds of topics, I believe, but I won't speak for the Inspector General. Second, as to this suggestion, which I've heard all too many times, that somehow January 6th was orchestrated by FBI agents or human or sources, I will note that in addition to my prior comments, that there have now been 850-ish individuals who've pled guilty, another 180 who've gone to trial. They've all had access to defense counsel, discovery, all the things the Constitution and the rules provide them. It's been in front of something like 15 different judges, I think dozens
All
of
DC.
juries, and not one has given credence to this notion. And in fact, I
They don't allow it in, you liar.
don't think any of them have even really seriously tried to raise it.
Yes, they have, and they've all been denied. We covered it here on the Proud Boys trial. It makes my blood boil. So now we talk about the assassination attempt. Thomas Massie, in his other portion of his questioning, was able to dig in on this, get specific answers, but here is what he said dealing with Wray.
Gentleman yields back. It is good to have Mr. Massie back with us today. Some of us had a chance to go to Kentucky over the last few weeks and visit with Thomas and his family. And
Amazing they
there are all
did that.
kinds of wonderful stories about Rhonda. Amazing, amazing lady, gentle spirit, and we're glad to have Mr. Massie back with us. Next 5 minutes belong to you, Congressman.
Thank you, Chairman.
Thanks, Jim. What a classy dude. Nice thing to say and do.
Director Wray, how many counter snipers were present at the rally? Which of the counter snipers took the shot that took out the would-be assassin?
I don't have the number of counter counter-snipers. I know it was the Secret Service counter-sniper who took the shot that eliminated the shooter. And we've conducted a number of interviews, including of him.
Was it one of the two that we see in the videos on top of the roof, or was it a different location?
I'm afraid I don't have that at my fingertips here.
Okay. You mentioned that the would-be assassin bought a 5-foot ladder. You have credit card evidence of that. But it looks like on the scene there was a larger ladder that he might have used. Do you know which ladder he used to get to the roof? And do you have possession of that 5-foot ladder and the other ladder? And do you know how the taller ladder got to the scene?
So this whole business about the ladder is something we're drilling into more. We do have possession of the 5-foot ladder that he purchased close in time to his attempted assassination, that we've traced the purchase of that ladder from a receipt, a bloody receipt that he had on him at the time his body was recovered on the roof. We do not yet know for sure how exactly he got up on the roof. We're looking at, various forensic pieces to try to kind of piece that together. So more to come on that.
Do you know where the 5-foot ladder was found or retrieved? Was it near the roof, or was it still in his vehicle?
Neither. I don't have it in front of me, but I know that it was not on scene, and I know that it was not in his vehicle.
Where was it?
We can circle back to you. And
Okay.
Where was it then?
Is there any evidence at all that he may have been in contact with somebody else before this occurred that may have had any prior knowledge or may have helped him plan this event?
Good questions.
Well, needless to say, that is a question that we're intensely focused on because that would obviously be incredibly meaningful. So far, we have not found any evidence of any accomplices or co-conspirators, foreign or domestic.
And you're using geolocation data to see if his cell phone was near another cell phone, I presume?
Right. We're doing lots of different kinds of cellular analysis, geolocation stuff, looking at his accounts. He, from everything we've seen, which is consistent with what we've learned in interviews, a lot of people describe him as a loner. That does kind of fit with what we're seeing in his devices. His list of contacts, for example, is very short, compared to what you would normally see from most people. It doesn't appear to be a whole lot of interaction between him, face-to-face or digital with a lot of people.
Okay, thank you.
That doesn't mean there's not any, and that's why we're drilling into. We're trying to talk to anybody who's had any engagement with him whatsoever, digital, in person, classmates, coworkers,
Right.
et cetera.
Appreciate that.
All right, so that's Massie doing great work with Christopher Wray. Jim Jordan, the chairman of the Judiciary Committee, also had his 5 minutes. Let's listen to see what Jim had to say.
Director, let me go back to where Mr. Bishop was. Tell me about the drone. You act like you wanted to fill us in on that. Fill us in.
Let me ask this question. Why doesn't the FBI disclose to the American people all of the investigative detail and evidence that you are gathering as it is gathered?
Well, we have tried to be transparent with both Congress and the American people as we're going along in the investigation. Frankly, unusually so for an ongoing investigation, given the sheer nature of it. We have provided a lot of information. I expect to continue to provide information. I expect to be able to provide some additional information here today in response to your questions and your colleagues. But part of the issue is that, as like in any investigation, as we proceed, facts evolve. Our understanding of what somebody said turns out to have more context that we didn't have before. We have additional leads out there. So part of our goal is not just to respect the ongoing investigation process, but also to make sure that we don't prematurely provide information that then 2 days later turns out to be different than what we told people, because that's very much, kind of a natural part of any investigation.
Did Crooks fire 8 shots?
We have recovered 8 cartridges on the roof.
That's what Johnson said yesterday.
Why was Crooks allowed to get off 8 shots?
Well, that I think is something we're still digging into. Again, maybe this is a good place for me to make clear the different investigations that are going on. So, because certainly I understand
Well, I'm really interested because I appreciate your invitation. You said you're prepared to disclose things as questions are asked. So I don't want to waste time, I just want to get to the questions, and as many members as can ask questions that you'll answer. I actually think I'd be glad for you to go on soliloquy, frankly, and tell us what you know. I think the American people want to know. Why was President Trump not kept off the stage?
Great question.
we don't know the answer to that.
Yeah.
But I want to be clear, and this is important because I think it goes to questions that I can and cannot answer. Our investigation, the FBI's mandate, is focused on the shooter and all things related to his attack. Now, obviously, I understand very much the intense interest and focus on the Secret Service's performance, actions, decision-making,
Not
et
my
cetera.
jurisdiction.
There are 2 separate after-action reviews, the DHS Inspector General and the outside independent panel that's been convened that are focused on that. Now, our
Everybody
investigation
understands
will
that. Everybody
obviously
understands that,
overlap
Director
with
Wray.
that.
Here's the
Yeah.
problem. We're out 13 days, and you say we've been disclosing. We had the the colonel from the Pennsylvania State Police and from
Yesterday,
Homeland
we covered
yesterday.
it.
He was quite candid.
Yeah.
He disclosed to us that Butler Emergency Services Unit personnel were posted into the windows on the 2nd floor of the AGR building.
Yep.
That they left there to go pursue the person that they spotted, Crooks. That they texted a photo of Crooks to the PSP ASP representative in the command center. That information was relayed to the United States Secret Service. They asked that it be texted to someone else. That was many minutes before President Trump took the stand. What we don't know is why were they not keeping him off the stand? And to the extent, I know we always hear when there's a criminal investigation, you got to wait for that to develop. Do you have any other target of your criminal investigation other than Crooks, who's dead?
We are investigating the shooter both to determine his motive and his preparations and activities before the shooting, but also to make sure whether or not there are any co-conspirators, accomplices.
At this point, have you developed any evidence to so suggest that there are any accomplices or cooperators or assisters?
Not at this time, but again, the investigation's ongoing.
So here's the thing. While we wait, maybe for months, and I hate to say this, I'm not trying to take a pot shot, but the country went for years with the understanding that the Hunter Biden laptop was Russian disinformation as offered by respected former intel officials.
Liars.
And the whole time the FBI had the laptop and then let that happen in public until finally offering testimony in a case.
Politically.
To the degree
corrupt.
we wait to hear as a country and as a Congress what has happened in this event, because the FBI is conducting an investigation, it provides quarter for the U.S. Secret Service not perhaps to reckon with the problems that are obvious to everyone. So Senator Grassley says that the records of the day show that there was a counter unmanned aerial surveillance operator on site. Was there? And why did that person not prevent Crooks from being able to use a drone?
So again, questions about the Secret Service's performance are better directed to those other reviews. What I can tell you when it comes to drones is that Crooks himself had a drone, and I'm prepared to answer questions here today about the shooter and his use of the drone, for example.
Yeah, and nothing to do about why the Secret Service was sitting there with their thumb in their derriere trying to figure out what was going on or allowing him to fly a drone all over the place. So here's Jim Jordan also picking this up, digging back into the question of the drone.
So we have recovered a drone that the shooter appears to have used. It's being exploited and analyzed by the FBI lab. The drone was recovered in his vehicle. So at the time of the shooting, the drone was in his vehicle with the controller. In addition, our investigation has uncovered...
Do you know what time of day he flew it, and if he flew it on the day of the shot?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry.
In addition, it appears that around 3:50 p.m., 4 o'clock in that window on the day of the shooting, that the shooter was flying the drone around the area for about 11 minutes. I want to be clear, but when I say the area, not over the stage and that part of the area itself, but I would say about 200 yards, give or take, away from that. We think, but we do not know. So again, this is one of these things that's qualified because of our ongoing review, that he was live streaming, viewing the footage from that, again, about 11 minutes and around the 3:50, 4 o'clock p.m. range.
2 hours before, he's flying a drone in the vicinity of the route.
About 200 yards away.
Scoping the whole place out.
That's important information. What about the bombs that we've heard about in the shooter's car?
So again, the FBI lab is exploiting those explosive devices. We've recovered 3 devices, 2 in his vehicle and 1 back in his residence.
Are these what you would call, your experts would call sophisticated operations, or this, I don't know. That's what I've been told by people who have some understanding of this area.
I think we've seen more sophisticated and less. I would say these are relatively, again, keyword relatively crude devices themselves, but they did have the ability to be detonated remotely. And so to that point, in addition to the 2 devices that we recovered out of his vehicle, there were receivers for those 2 explosive devices with the devices. And then on the shooter himself, when he was killed by law enforcement, he had a transmitter with him. Now, I do want to add one important point here, is at the moment, it looks to us, again, ongoing review, and I can't say that too many times. At a moment, it looks like because of the on-off position on the receivers, that if he had tried to detonate those devices from the roof, it would not have worked. But that doesn't mean the explosives weren't dangerous.
I'm sure we're going to get into all these subjects a little bit later as well. Tell us what you can about the encrypted platforms we've heard about.
So one of the things that we're drilling into hard with the shooter in an effort to try to learn more about his state of mind, his motive, his ideology, his contacts, everything else, is to look at all of his devices, any social media accounts he had, et cetera. And one of the things we've learned in finally getting into his phone, which was also a significant technical challenge from an encryption perspective, but in addition, once we got on the phone, it turned out he was using some encrypted messaging application.
And again, the same question relative to the bombs. Was this pretty sophisticated, or is this the kind of the norm you see with folks like
auto-delete?
Similar situation? How would you describe
on this subject, I would say this has unfortunately now become very commonplace, and it's a real challenge for not just the FBI, but state and local law enforcement all over the country.
Tell me exactly the scope. Does the scope of your investigation include what I call that critical 5 minutes from when the 6:09, when this is based, I think, on the information you've given to Congress, 6:09 when the shooter's identified on the roof, and 6:14 when President Trump is ultimately escorted off, and all that happens, the shots that take place in between there? Do you have access to the communications that were going on at the time in that critical 5 minutes?
So our investigation, when you say scope, our investigation includes that time frame, although focused again on the shooter himself.
Understand?
Yeah,
He's
not the
involved in
Secret
that.
Service.
He's obviously involved in that time frame.
Correct. And as part of that, as part of our focus, our investigation of the shooter and the attack,
Why are they-
of course, we are interviewing law enforcement from
Yeah.
the scene because those are some of the
Yeah,
most
but we're not gonna look at Secret
significant
Service.
witnesses, and we're obviously getting access to their materials and that kind of thing. And the Secret
You have access to the communications that exist there.
That exact question, as I sit here at
Yeah.
the moment, I don't know the exact answer to that question, but I know that Secret Service has been
Well, that's what he was asking, Chris. Why were you talking about a bunch of other stuff that he wasn't asking about?
cooperative with us.
Congress would like access to those
No,
communications.
they don't exist.
as Well, I mean, not just that 5 minutes, although I think that's the critical time frame. There's lots of communications we'd love to have access as well.
Yeah, we'd love to see those too. So some of them surely exist, like the text messages, the pictures that were taken, all that surely exists. But the radio comms, Secret Service Director Cheadle, before she resigned like a coward, ran away, she admitted that there was no recordings. There's no radio comms that have been saved. They deleted all of that, just like they deleted the J6 text messages. They don't want anybody to know what they've done. So we also saw this was a curious one from the director, was asked about some Google searches, and apparently he was searching for Oswald Kennedy and how far the distance was when that shot took place.
Now, in terms of what we've been able to find so far, a lot of the usual repositories of information have not yielded anything notable in terms of motive or like ideology. Having said that, it does look fairly clear that he was interested in public figures, kind of more broadly, and I think this is important, that starting somewhere around July 6th or so, he became very focused on former President Trump and this rally. And so one of the things that I can share here today that has not been shared yet is that we've just in the last couple of days found that from our review, to your point about devices, analysis of a laptop that the investigation ties to the shooter reveals that on July 6th, he did a Google search for, quote, how far away was Oswald from Kennedy?
Wow.
And so that's a search that obviously is significant in terms of his state of mind. That is the same day that it appears that he registered for the Butler rally.
Okay, so guess he's like a little assassin wannabe. Another interesting clip there. So Byron Donalds is giving us a summary on this. He says, just now, here's what his summary sounds like. He says, look, we just got notice from FBI Director Wray that the Trump shooter visited the rally site first time a week before the shooting, then the morning of the shooting, and then, of course, the afternoon of the shooting. Says on July 6th, the shooter both registered for the rally and he Googled how far Oswald was from Kennedy. Director Wray also revealed that the shooter flew a drone over the area about 3:50 p.m. They found 3 explosive devices. Remote detonators were not turned on. No accomplices named at this time. 8 bullet casings were found on the roof. Also says that Director Wray has revealed that the shooter purchased a ladder. The ladder was not found at the scene. It's unclear how the shooter got on the roof. And I thought that there was some commentary about maybe he just climbed up on that AC unit and then there were brackets on the wall. There was maybe a drainage pipe or something going up the wall to the roof that he could have climbed up upon. But an interesting exchange there. And then we also have another one from Nadler. Nadler's blaming the Republicans for this whole thing, saying that Trump caused this with his own comments. Let's listen to what the Democrats are talking about today.
This assassination attempt, as horrific as it is, should surprise no one.
Why?
And you would think a political party that almost lost their presidential candidate through an act of political violence would have something to say about the way the leaders keep talking about the next election. Donald Trump has warned there will be a, quote, bloodbath if he loses.
Fake.
Republican Ohio State Senator George Lang said just last week at a rally for J.D. Vance that he is, quote, afraid that civil war might be necessary if Republicans lose the November election. President of the right-wing think tank and Project 2025 leader, the Heritage Foundation, Kevin Roberts, said on Stephen Bannon's podcast, quote, we're in the process of the second American Revolution, which will remain bloodless if the left allows it to be, close quote. Republican former Alaska Governor Sarah Palin said in August.
All right, I guess blaming the Republicans on this. So enough out of Nadler on that. And shout out to Marissa Henson for clipping that one for us. Appreciate that. We also had this one from Benny Johnson. He clipped this one. Matt Gaetz lacing into Christopher Wray. Some talk about Biden dementia, what Chris knew and when he knew it. Here's this exchange clip bit from Benny Johnson.
Was the shooter on the FBI's radar in any way prior to the assassination attempt?
We did not have any information about the shooter. He was not in our holdings before the shooting.
No communication in any chat rooms, no CIs or confidential human sources have any interaction with?
No, we've run a thorough search for the subject through all of our holdings, and he was not in anywhere.
Were there any FBI agents or informants present at the Trump rally in Butler?
Not to my knowledge.
And Mr. Jordan was talking to you about Iran. Were law enforcement resources diverted from the protection of President Trump to John Bolton as a consequence of concern that Mr. Bolton might have been the target of Iranian malign efforts?
That's really a Secret Service decision. I don't know the answer to that. That's really something they would know better. What I can tell you is that there are a number of individuals, you mentioned one who we've brought a case, specific criminal case for the Iranians targeting for assassination, but how the
Are you going to get that answer to us, whether or not resources were diverted from Trump to Bolton? Is that just going to be part of your review?
I think that's going to be part of the reviews by the Inspector General.
The Inspector General for DHS, right?
Of DHS,
Right,
and the outside panel.
And I think that's an important point because the Inspector General for DHS has really fallen out of favor with the administration because he's been pointing out all the problems on the border with Mayorkas and Biden, and we're always kind of worried that they're about to fire him, which would be a really bad idea. Now this role that you've identified is so critical. It'd be a bad idea to fire the IG for DHS during the pendency of this, right, Mr. Director?
I don't think that would be a good idea.
I'm with you on that. So I want to zoom out a little bit. How often do you brief President Biden?
You mean on this
No, just
specific
general.
case?
In your role as FBI.
I mean, I don't know that I could give you a number.
Is it like weekly, monthly, daily?
It's not
Quarterly?
It's not at a regular cadence. There have been times when there have been months at a time when I haven't, and then there have been times when several days apart I have. It's always with other people.
The vice president, is she typically there?
Often has been.
Okay, so when did you notice his decline?
In my interactions, in my role, all my interactions with current president have been completely professional.
Right, but I mean the cognitive decline. I'm not saying he treated you unprofessionally, just maybe not picking things up as quickly as he used to.
Matt Gaetz is...
Again, I don't meet with him very often, but what you're describing is not something that I've observed during my interactions with him.
We've had it observed so often that the ranking member and Mr. Schiff on this committee have said that he could no longer continue as a candidate. And so since you're the FBI director, I was just sort of wondering, like, who's running the country? If something bad happened, you'd have to
the
go
intelligence
brief
agencies.
President Biden about it right now, God forbid.
Me and the CIA.
On any number of occasions, I have briefed the president, and as I said, those briefings have all been uneventful and unremarkable.
Yeah.
Well, I can imagine them being uneventful. But in the work where the vice president's also present, like you say, there's like more than half the time there's these briefings, she's there too?
I don't know if I'd said more than half the time. Certainly, there have been times where she's been present. There have been other times where she hasn't.
I take you at your word when you say this is the most complicated threat environment you've ever observed over a long career in law enforcement. And I'm just kind of wondering, with this assassination attempt, with the invasion at our border, with all the Hamas that have been let in that you've talked about and briefed about, like, is Biden up to it? And if he's not up to it, and you're a guy who's been regularly briefing him, like, who's been in on this conspiracy to hide the real Joe Biden from all of us for years? It never occurred to you that this guy wasn't up to it in all these briefings you did?
As I said, my briefings with the president have all been completely fine.
Were they between
briefed,
10 a.m. and
he's
4
asked
p.m.?
questions. There hasn't been anything of note in the area that you're talking about.
Yeah, did you ever have to brief him before 10 a.m. or after 4 p.m.? We hear those are as good hours.
I've certainly times that I have briefed have included outside those hours.
Okay.
Right. I think the American people want to know how we got to this point with someone who's so diminished his own party has basically put him out to pasture. And since you had close proximity and the vice president had close proximity, I'm just kind of wondering if you were being straight with all of us about how things were going with him.
Yeah,
I guess we'll have to figure that out.
You can count on me to be straight with you, sir.
Yeah, we sure can. I'm sure about that, Chris. Thanks for that. We'll be here continuing to cover it, my friends. Thank you so much for subscribing and joining us as we do. We'd love it if you invited someone that you know or love to come over and check our channel out. That would mean the world to us so that we can see them and you back here on the next one.